hopping and a bopping and a singing his song. All the little birds on Jaybird Street love to hear the robin go tweet, tweet, tweet. Rockin' Robin, tweet, tweet, rockin' Robin, tweet, tweet. Blow rockin' Robin, 'cause we really gonna rock tonight.
Welcome to I'm Heather Mckeown, your ever-loving hostess, and guess who we have today? All of you know this man already. He's done everything, he's been everywhere, and he is much missed by his students. Yes, indeed. So introduce yourself to our fabulous audience.
Well, my name is Tom Evans. Yeah, that's who I am.
That's who he is, but he's so much more than that. We're going to start with a little bit of your life because you were born in Argentina.
I was born in Buenos Aires, Argentina. Yep, my dad worked for General Motors, and so I was born 1958 and lived there for the first 11 years of my life. And then he got transferred, lived outside of New York City.
Where?
Across the George Washington Bridge in Bergen County, New Jersey. So he would commute every day. Lived there for 4 or 5 years and then moved to London, England when I was 16, and Dad retired 4 years later, so came back to Vermont when I was about 20.
Because you love Vermont?
I do love Vermont. Been here since.
Yeah, I love it here too. The question I have about Argentina, you were there during the just after the Peronist years, were you not?
Correct, yeah. Well, Perón, he had his stay in the early 50s. He came back, I believe, in 74 for a short term, like for 4 or 5 months. But mostly Juan Perón was gone by the time I was born there.
Do you remember how it affected your family having him in power before you were born? They must have spoken of it often.
Well, I think when was very important for my parents that if we were going to live overseas, no matter where we lived, that we lived with the indigenous people of that country. So in Buenos Aires, a lot of the Americans that were there for other corporations as well as General Motors lived in a place called Little America. It was basically a
McDonald's and 4 apartment buildings.
Well, whatever, and where most American families did. We lived in the natural, just with the indigenous Argentine people, and so it was. And we led a lavish lifestyle. The dollar versus the peso. So Dad got paid in American dollars. And the cost of living down then was very inexpensive, so we lived quite lavishly. And but there were my dad was kidnapped twice and held for ransom.
Very common down there.
Right, and that's basically part of the give and take of living in such a beautiful place. But yet,
how long was he kept each time? And did General Motors take care of it?
No more than 24 hours. I think the most scariest time was he was driven out to the Pampas. So from Buenos Aires, there's some outside of the city, the Pampas, the country, and it's just a flat expanse of land, very barren, large ranches, estancias they call them. And he was taken he would just finished bowling, was getting into his car, was attacked from behind, thrown in the back seat of the car, blindfolded, and driven, I'd say at least 60 to 70 miles out into the Pampas. Whatever the exchange was, I'm not sure how it happened, but they were able to get some money for him. It was
from General Motors?
Actually, no. Now that I'm just remembering, no. They tried to extort some money from him, and we're going to then call the General Motors and say, we've got one of your executives. And my dad just said, no, take the car. It's yours. I won't even report it. I won't even blah, blah, blah. And so what they did was they stripped him naked, left him out in the Pampas, and just drove off with the car. And then he he has 2200 vision.
Does that mean what?
2200. It's actually it's the reason why he couldn't. Another good story about
Couldn't
him.
fly.
Well, he couldn't when he went for World War II. He couldn't pass the eye exam, so he wouldn't have been. He'd been disqualified to be in the army. But he wanted to join so much that he went to. He went to many recruiting stations, and in each station, he realized that there was 5 major eye charts. And what he did was he could read the first letter of each chart. So he got each chart, memorized each chart, and so then when he went into the recruiting or the sign-up, he would just look at the first letter, and then he memorized it all. So he was able to go to the army and serve in World War II.
There were so many little fibbers who got into the war. One of my dad's best friends was blind in one eye. And so he went in and they said, read this, and they put a card or a spoon or something over his eye, and then he went da-da-da-da-da, and they went da-da-da-da-da-da with the same eye.
He probably did the same thing. He probably did the same thing.
And my dad was colorblind, so he wasn't allowed to do a lot of things. He wasn't allowed to fly.
Well, they definitely wanted to serve, and so...
They did, and nowadays...
That's why they call the greatest generation.
They are the greatest generation, and they were the biggest fibbers, but they taught us to be so honest.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, don't do this.
Yeah.
But do as I say, not as I do.
Right.
But no, they were terrific. I really miss my dad. How long has yours been gone?
2009.
Mine too was
2009.
Mine was 2000, I think, and 13. It was 10 days away from being 90.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he would have been 100 this year. And I've got to say, you have no idea how much wisdom you lose when they go away and you can't phone them up and say, Dad, I'm just thinking of this. And he would say, well, if you did it this way, it would be a shortcut, but you'd get to the answer and it would be a better answer than the one you just tried to give me.
Right.
And I really leaned on him for that stuff.
Yeah. And I'm sure you find the same thing, that many of the conversations, whether you actually had them or not, you can hear both my father and my mother talking to myself. And, whether it's from memory or just knowing them as well as you know them and
this
loving
is what
them.
they say, yeah.
And they keep talking to you. So I've always said that.
You told me about your mom a little bit.
Yeah.
Why don't you tell our audience a little bit about this dynamic woman who flower gardened like mad?
Yeah, she, put it blank, she was a kick-ass woman. Both my mother and dad grew up in Burlington. Both my grandfathers were professors at University of Vermont, so they grew up in Burlington. Mom ended up getting her, after she graduated from college, she ended up getting her master's degree from Columbia University.
Ooh.
Went back in 46, because I think Dad had just got back from the war. And my mom was an adjunct professor at University of Vermont.
Teaching what?
Teaching some English, I don't know whether it's
Like Garrison Keillor says.
English literature, I don't know.
It's like what Garrison Keillor used to say. You're an English major, and what's your favorite sentence? Do you want fries with that? But, I've got to say, without... those are my favorite subjects. History, English, North American literature.
Well, my grandfather was head of the history department at University of Vermont.
Get out of town.
Yeah, and then ended up being also I think it's called curator. After retired teaching, he was the curator of the UVM library.
Very nice.
I think it's called curator. But
yes,
anyway.
and it's the acquisition of historical volumes or appropriate volumes for their department.
Is that, yeah.
And I am not a curator. I'm a collector of books, but not a curator. I just go to Nevermore bookstore and get what I can get.
Yeah.
But that's great. But when your mom passed away, you took over their home, did you not?
Yeah. So Mom and Dad retired in 1978. At that point, I was going to University of Vermont, and they retired, and we went from London England to Glover, Vermont.
You'd hardly notice the difference.
Yeah, no difference. And lovely place, obviously. But anyway, so that home that they bought in Glover, I mean, I knew of it and lived in it much from that day on till I sold it in 2006. So for me and most of my family, that was the family home, because living overseas, you move quite often with General Motors Overseas Corporation. So we never really had one house for more than a couple, maybe 3 years at the most. So this became our family home. So when my mom died in 1995.
That's a long time ago, my goodness.
Yeah. My dad was having some adjusting issues to life without mom and decided he didn't want the house. So he sold the house to me. And that was in 1996. And then again, I lived in it for 10 years till I sold it in 2006.
That was tough.
Yeah.
Now, London gave you more than just the acquisition of another language.
Well,
If I was any more British, I couldn't talk at all.
No, yeah. Well, my younger brother had a great English accent, but I never caught on to it.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, I never pick up accents where I go.
Mm-hmm.
My daughter is a great mimic. She can mimic just about anything, and I crack up. She can do a Vermont accent, and I can't. And I'm thinking, she says, "Well, my son was born here, Mom, so of course I can speak it. I have to communicate with my son." But London, I love London, and I used to go just
beautiful city.
3 days, and living in Montreal, you just jump on a plane and go for 3 days and come back, see 2 plays, catch the last tube home, and I always stayed in Kensington.
Mm-hmm.
There was a girls' school there, and they allowed. Well, I'm Canadian and a girl, so I guess I was allowed to stay there when they were out of session.
Yeah.
And they had a night watchman, and we had a curfew, and it was just like being home, really. But it was such a great place, and I'd spend the whole day in the Tate, just in magical times.
Mm-hmm.
And
it's a great city.
But I don't miss that stuff. I love to do it. If somebody called me and say, "Hey, we want to go to London," I'd say, "Yeah, sure." But I don't feel the urge to go right now because I've got Vermont. And I'm so comfortable.
And I also think, I mean, at least for me, when you've experienced, I'm one that really kind of adapts to where I'm at. So when I was in London, it was lovely. It was the hustle bustle, all the things to do, and et cetera, et cetera. But I'm also really quite content.
Yeah.
In Vermont, with
If
less
you're
to do, but.
It's a richer place to live, I think. There's a depth here that isn't based on energy, the constant need to do.
Mm-hmm.
And once you get that in your system, I don't imagine you can go very far without wanting to come back for a refresher of energy from here.
Right.
It comes up through the ground.
Yeah.
But that's where...
And I also found, though, I mean, one of the things, I mean, over the years now, past 4 decades, but... When I first moved here, I really enjoyed the sensibilities of the Vermont, well, I'm going to say the Northeast Kingdom, because that's where I was at, people. I mean, such an eclectic group.
Mm-hmm. All intelligent in their own way.
Well, and also, there's such a diverse spectrum of politics, of belief systems, etc. And what I really enjoyed about being here was people told you where they were at.
Yeah.
There was nothing, behind the back. And I mean, if they would just tell you,
yes, they will.
You're full of it, or agree and whatever. And for me, that was very fresh, and I appreciate that much in people.
Me too.
It's just not the cloak and dagger, and so that and the area is so beautiful, and just loved it, and been here since.
Yeah. In London, is that where you had your epiphany about walking into a room and knowing exactly what you wanted to do for the rest of your life?
Yes, yeah.
Well, listen to this. This is so cool.
This was in between, like I said, when I started university, and I went to the University of Vermont. Figured if I couldn't get into UVM, I couldn't get into any school.
At least you could spell it.
You know, yeah, right. And anyway, so I went in as a business administration major, thinking that I'll just follow my dad's footstep. I was very, you know, like many people, didn't think much. Just it was the next step in life to go to college. And I went. Because my parents were overseas, I could only go back. I couldn't go back holidays. I could only go like Thanksgiving, short holidays. But I'd go back in Christmas and I'd go back in the summer. So I went back Christmas. Decided that business administration wasn't for me, and I decided to change to engineering. Went back for the second semester freshman year. Finished second semester freshman year. Went back to London over the summer, and that was not really clicking with me. And anyway, during that summer, my mother volunteered at a remedial center in London, and she came up to me within the first week or so that I was back from university and said, you know, they're looking for some people, teachers' aides at the remedial center. And I kind of looked at her and said, Mom, teaching? Me? And she said, well, just letting you know. And again, I wanted to work and etc. So I decided to go interview for it. And I'll never forget. I remember walking up, it was on the second floor of this building, and I knocked on this door. The door opened, and I stepped into a classroom. Students and teachers, and honestly, I was home. Yeah. I was home. It was that sudden, it was that dramatic, and I remember before even being interviewed, there was someone working on something to my left as I walked in, and I just went there and began, and that was when I knew I wanted to teach.
Well, teachers are born, not made.
And quite honestly, I've told people this before. I taught 2 years at St. Paul's, 1 year at Barton, and then 33 at Lake Region Union High School, and I can count on two hands the number of days that I did not want to be there. And I'm going to tell you, 7 of them happened in my last year.
Was it politics?
Well, it just, I was burnt, I was getting burnt out.
Yeah, you can do that.
That's eventually what happened to me.
Yeah.
But no, it was always felt, the classroom, Lake Region, the people, the students, everything about it, no matter what was going on in my life, that always was home for me. That's always where I felt my most natural. That's where I always felt, if you want to know Tom Evans, that's where you go. The comfort level and the peace I felt in that environment was just, and I'm so thankful, grateful that I had that experience.
Have you considered going back and substituting a couple of days a week just to...
Well, as I just said, I got burnt out. And when I say burnt out, I mean I basically had a nervous breakdown in my last year. And that's what they call it. You can call it whatever you want. But
you had a lot going on in life.
Well, and basically I just, I had nothing left. Literally. There was a choice that I don't want to do it. I could not do it. I mean, physically I was, again, I'm pretty transparent in my story. I was hospitalized for 5 days, I was just burnt out.
I understand.
Just really burnt out and fatigued. And so now go back, I can't go back to that.
That's all right. Well, I will tell you something.
Because I just don't have the energy, what it takes.
I know.
I just don't have it.
One thing I did witness, and one reason I wanted you to come and be interviewed, is because I know a lot of teachers, and they're all burned out at younger ages than you, because the discipline in the classroom is not going well. There's a para-educator for every second child. There are so many days off. They're not getting the pay they deserve, all of these things. And Some of them do think they get the pay they deserve, but that's after quite a bit of seniority. But when I saw you out in public once, I noticed all the students coming up, and I could hear them, Mr. Evans, it's Mr. Evans, Mr. Evans. And it was like standing there watching you greet. It was like a receiving line. And those kids love you. And then my daughter and my grandson decided, well, it was his birthday, so he could pick a place to go to eat with Grandma.
Yeah.
And my daughter came too. And he picked the tavern over here. And the young lady who was serving us came up and she said, excuse me, do you know Mr. Evans, right? And I said, yes, I do. And she said, he's the greatest guy. He's the greatest guy. And we love him. My husband loves him. He's a soccer coach for my husband. He's just the greatest guy. And when you have that accolade coming from a generation that doesn't usually respect teachers in general, I sat there and just watched this girl talk to my daughter and tried to figure out how old she was.
Yeah.
And her husband was one of your students.
Yeah. I know who you speak of.
She's lovely.
She is lovely, and so is he. And it's, again, it was, and thank you.
Well, you don't even hear, we didn't even hear our teachers' first names.
Yeah.
And then they started putting this, not just the initial, but the entire name in the yearbook so we could say, oh, her first name is Monica. Oh, I thought it was M, but.
Oh no, I feel very blessed, as I said, and so grateful for my time. I mean, it was truly a, it sounds corny, and it is corny, but nonetheless it's true. I mean, they're family. I mean, I honestly, for 4 years, I spent a lot of time and emotional, physical energy with my students, players, and
soccer coach here.
And they gave me much more than I gave them. I can tell you that. I mean, literally. And to this day, they still give. So it's definitely a blessing. I feel.
How about soccer coaching? One of our conversations, you were watching the Argentine game, or somebody came up to you at one point and said, "You must have been really happy when the Argentinians won," and your face just lit up, and I'm thinking, soccer. Okay.
Well, again, see, for me, in Argentina, growing up, it's not. It becomes a part of you.
Well, I'm from Quebec, so it's hockey.
Yeah. So it's just a part of you. If you have anything that can be used as a soccer ball, you play. You do something, whatever it is. So it becomes really a part of you. It's more of a feeling that's within you. You feel the game. You sense the game. So for me, that's what soccer is. So it's a very passionate thing. It's a living organism for me.
Sure.
It's not just about, quite honestly, winning and losing. That is a result of doing something you love to do, and the inherent beauty in the game. It's very much like learning. I mean, we have tests, we have this and that, but hopefully we begin, what I attempted to do was to try to have my students just understand their learning process, how they think, what is the beauty in thinking, the marvel that we can think the way we do, and that as the essence of learning rather than a result.
Yeah.
Similarly in coaching, soccer, it's the essence of the game. Yes, there is a result, but as I always tell my players, that I want success to be determined by their internal
need?
Well, their internal goals rather than the external world telling them whether they've been successful or not. Because I think in athletics a lot what happens, and not just athletics, I think we all can relate to the fact that there are many times what you feel within yourself, whether it's about yourself, about what you're doing, etc., gets really drowned out by the external world, whether it's societal values or friends or whatever happens, by what they're telling you.
It's really hard to lose yourself in a crowd.
And so therefore and believe me, I understand the struggle between those two, but for my players and my students, as I said, it's try to internalize it to your expectations, to your goals, and therefore you can be successful even if the world tells you you're not. I mean, I had teams that, I think my worst record was like 2-10, or no, I think we were in 2-12 maybe. But that team, from day 1 to day 62, whatever it was we played, believed in themselves, and every day they came to practice hard, they played hard, they had fun, and we played each game. They happened to lose, I believe, 7 games, 1-0.
That's good, isn't it?
Well, what I'm saying is, so for me, what I guess my point is from the external world, and people that haven't been part of that family for that year or that 3 months, they might be told, oh, this team was not good, or this team was not made a good player, whatever words. But what I hopefully was successful with them, is that no, it was successful in the fact that each day we went out, improved each day was one of our mottos, and we did that, and we did not lose our passion and our love for the game as we played. And to me, that's successful.
That's it.
That's successful. And to me, no one can take that away from you.
I know, and when I go to, my son was in sports in school, and I don't think it did him a tremendous amount of good. It became a kind of a herd mentality, and a superiority complex for a lot of the athletic people in his school, and they were the jocks and the academic too. But it changed him, and it was all about winning. And I told him the only reason I was pro until I was 48 is that I was a gracious loser, and the sponsors would pick me up because no, I didn't win every race. But I was such a good sport about being a loser. So they were, and I enjoyed myself so much that I was good for the sport. But I said, winning isn't the end game, because he'd come home disappointed if they'd lost a game. Oh, that wasn't this. And then, don't blame the ref. Don't blame it. Just get out there and work a little harder next time if you're not happy with this result. But it wasn't backed up by a coach like you.
Well, and again, it's as I said, winning, you don't compete, at least in my opinion, you don't compete you want to have the best result possible, which is to win.
But don't hate yourself if you don't.
It's the same, but like I said, that we'll take that and we're going to do everything we can as individuals and as a team to set up the structure, to set up the networking, the skills, the talents to get us to that possible result. But that cannot be the only determinant of whether you are successful or not. Because if that is, you are going to have at the time 64 teams playing soccer on the men's side, and you're going to have 4 state champions in each division.
Yep.
So that leaves 60 other teams that are supposed to feel what? Like failures?
Like they did their best.
Well, again, don't get me wrong. Some people have that. I do not espouse or believe in that philosophy. I do not believe it.
Neither do I.
I do not believe it. So
I think it does a lot of damage when you have a win at all costs, win or you're not good enough attitude. I saw that, people would come to my clinic and they'd say some really weird things about wanting to beat me or something like that. And I said, just have fun. Just have fun. You'll have a great day one day. But if you stop enjoying what you're doing, if you start And we all trained hard, but don't make that your only goal, or the training is no fun, or nothing's any fun.
Well, see, that's just what I was trying to say earlier about learning and about soccer.
Yeah.
It's the love of the game. It's the love of being able to play the game. It's the love of the companionship with the love of working hard at something. All of that is more to me in the recipe of success than the win-loss.
Well, you made that very clear, and I think that's great. And I really think if you don't ever go back to teach students, I sure hope you get your hands on some of the coaches around here, and not around here, but around the state.
I can tell you in my, and maybe this might be a little egocentric, maybe I should be careful here. I don't mean it to be.
It's not egocentric. Truth.
I don't mean it to be at all.
We can learn from it.
But I believe that in the 36 teams I coached, that the vast majority of the players from those teams are quite proud. Maybe proud is not the right word, but are very
satisfied.
What's the word? That they know they played the game with dignity, with intensity, with integrity, and they played hard. And that experience was a very meaningful experience for them.
It was a character builder.
It was a meaningful experience.
Yeah.
It had nothing to do with the record.
Excellent.
It had to
you
do
have done your
with,
job well.
Well, they did their job. I mean, because that's just it. Quite honestly, that's why I always say, I'm not necessarily deflecting anything from myself, but we all know that the individuals involved are the ones that have to produce. They have to believe in it. They have to be all in with it and have that same passion, or it's not going to work.
No.
And so they worked hard.
Yeah, they did.
They worked hard.
But they didn't leave without a soul.
I wasn't an easy coach, for sure.
Good. I saw a picture of you on your Facebook page when I looked at it, and it was you with a hat on, crouched down, looking intensely at what I assume was the team.
Yeah.
And I thought, wow, he would have been a great hockey coach. He looks just like all the hockey coaches I watched at the forum with when I'd go to the hockey games.
Yeah, well, I'm definitely, I can say, very single-focused when it came to soccer matches. That was
Speaking England, too.
That was it.
Have you ever gone to the World Cup?
No, but my father went to the World Cup.
And he didn't take you?
No, in 1978, he went back to Argentina.
That was his retirement year.
And it was his retirement year, and he went back to Buenos Aires because they also he had been there, as I told you, from like 56 to 69. And so they also wanted to do something for him down with his Argentine colleagues and friends, and a lot of Argentines, because as I said, we lived out with the people. And that year Argentina was hosting the World Cup. Not only were they hosting the World Cup, they won the World Cup. And so he brought back for me a flag from, basically Argentina, campeones del mundo, champions of the world, and their phrase, con ganas y corazón, which means with desire and heart.
Yeah.
And that is a phrase that I then used with my teams for all my years coaching, because for me, desire and heart, that's what I was striving for.
Well, you made it.
So, well, thank you.
What have you been doing since retirement?
Not too terribly much. I've been helping my sister she has 87 acres in Brownington, and helping her.
Do you mow it?
Well, not mow it, but she does a lot of stone work and tree work and things of that nature, gardens. I've been doing basically just little things here and there, nothing too too elaborate or too intense by any means, because again, my capacity at this point is not what it used to be. So
You're in good health, though.
I believe so. Yeah.
Yeah, capacity and desire.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just.
I've got just an acre here, and it keeps me busy.
Right.
I don't know how your sister has 87.
Yeah.
Bless her heart.
Yeah, beautiful stuff. Beautiful.
When you say she does stonework, does she make fences?
No, she's kind of like some mini Stonehenge type stuff.
Ooh.
Which some of the rocks are quite large.
Yes, and she says, "Oh, I'm going to call my brother. He can lift this
And
4-ton
she does,
rock.
and
If
she
the
does.
Egyptians could do it and make pyramids, then Druids could do it and make Stonehenge. I've got a brother. He can do it."
Yeah. No, well, I mean, it's in with machinery. It's not just. I mean, some of these rocks are 10 feet, probably 3 tons. I mean, they're 3 tons. So she needs some heavy equipment.
For sure. Does she bring Druidic people in there? And
Well, she basically has. She's very. I guess the word is metaphysical.
Yep.
And has some, I would say, strong skills in that world, and so has a lot of different healing places and things kind of talk to her, and
Oh,
you
yeah.
know, it's. Like I always, when I work with her, she'll say things, and about the tree or about the rock, and I just say to her, "You remember, some of us don't speak the same language that you're hearing. In other words, she senses things at a different level
Definitely.
than I might sense.
different frequencies.
And I think that's true of we all know people who operate on different levels of consciousness, and so be it.
I know. And if you picture yourself as an old-time radio and you can turn the dial to get on other people's, that's what
Frequency.
I did. You can
Yeah.
do that. I mean, I had to do that working for JetBlue. I had to do it all my life to hone in on what they needed.
Mm-hmm.
And it touch wood, never fails me.
Yeah.
I think it's a real gift. Other people in my family do the same thing, but we have people in my family who are very strong in that and escape it because it scares them to death.
Well, that's.
And it can, but if you embrace it. And I had metaphysics taught at my house in Oklahoma for 3.5 years. Every Wednesday night we called it the Spook Group because it was the buckle of the Bible belt.
Yeah.
And this wonderful woman, Martha Moore, who became Martha Moore Stevens, she was in her 80s when she started teaching me because she read something I wrote for a newspaper. She came to one of my lectures, and amazingly, it was a lecture to triathletes, and because I was one, and I guess there must have been 100 people there, and the host was one of my sponsors. So, and I looked around the room, and there was this woman at the back with cropped gray hair and a navy blue dress with a set of costume pearls here. And I had heard my husband talk about this woman at American Airlines who he knew, whose name was Martha, and he said, "She's the weirdest woman I've ever met. She's just so absolutely weird, And I said, "Yeah," and he said, "This is what she does, and she only eats a raisin for lunch. Can you imagine that?" And she actually had 3 raisins for lunch.
Yeah.
But
who's counting?
she lived into her 90s without seeing a doctor until the last month of her life.
Yeah. Wonderful.
And so I looked across at this faces looking up, and I think, that's Martha.
Wow.
And from that point forward, she's the only person I talked to in the room. And, because that was a connection. And she came after the lecture and she said, "Hello, Heather. I read some of your stories and we have to talk.
Wow.
You're using the right language, but you feel it, but you're not using the right language.
Oh, wow.
You're getting the idea semi-across, but if you've had this, you should get it out there so that everyone understands it."
Yeah.
So she said, "May I come to your house?" And I said, "Sure, when? Wednesday night." "Okay," And it was every Wednesday night for 3.5 years.
Wow.
And we gathered quite a group. And
That's amazing.
if you don't have the vocabulary to express how that gut feeling has been yours all your life and intuitively, you slow yourself down. There's no open path. There are a million paths, but you don't know where to go. So if your sister's already found her vocabulary, that's marvelous. I was guided. And I've been guided just by meeting people and say, oh, this, you have to read this book, or I think you would understand this, or have you ever felt this? And I'd love to meet your sister because
Well, you probably will.
because I find more of us in Vermont than any other place in a collective society as people who just understand or have an intuition that is just off the chart.
Yeah. Well, like as I said earlier, there's definitely an eclectic group, and I think there's a good percentage that are, as I said, I don't know if the right word is, but the metaphysics, just the different levels of consciousness, how to be in this world.
Yeah,
And,
it's a beautiful thing to be.
Yeah.
And I feel so at home in Vermont. It's there's so many wise souls here. There's so many spirit guides and people you meet who just happen to know you need to know this, and you meet them in Walmart.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Sure.
I bumped into a man today. I'd never met him before in my life. He just stopped me. And he said, I'd like to get to know you. And I said, well, here I am. He said, not now. And he disappeared into the next aisle. But he was
Well, my guess also, I think it's like anything. I think it says a lot to you about you and your openness and your level of frequency. If you have people doing that to you, there must be something that they sense.
well, you see, I'm saying that's what you have in Vermont.
Yep.
Nobody's rushing. They have
Right.
time to pick up your frequency.
Yeah.
And I watched you when I was in the same restaurant with you.
Right.
And I just watched you. And I watched the people coming up to you. And you understood every single level of every single person who came up to you. And then there was a Spanish young man. Remember that? He was from Guatemala, I believe.
Keep going.
And you had gone out of the restaurant for a break. And you came back in. And he came up to you and just gave you a huge hug. And he started dancing. And and he was a young man, and you spoke Spanish to him.
I just met him.
Yes, you
I
just
just
met him
met
that
him.
very
Yes.
day.
Oh, okay.
And
Yes.
he gravitated
Yes. I'm
towards
sorry.
you, and the joy. And then,
Yes.
as I was walking out of the restaurant,
yes,
you know,
now-
we
yes,
were
I'm
walking
with you.
out similarly, and he looked at me, and I guess he figured out that I knew you. And he just embraced me.
Yeah.
I wanted to bring him home. It's
Yeah.
like, son, be
Yeah.
cuddly teddy bear. I'll adopt you. But he just absolutely filled, and you lit up that room. You lit up his space. He was homesick, and you were there for him.
Yeah.
And it was a nice thing to see.
Hmm.
So you get that in Vermont.
Yeah, definitely. Well, it's yeah, most definitely. There are a lot of beautiful people, for sure.
Yeah, well, you're a beacon.
Wow.
Is there anything else you'd like to talk about?
No, I would dispute that last statement, but thank you.
It's my show.
appreciate-
He's a beacon.
Thank you. But, no, I think I'm very honored, and thank you for having me. And,
My pleasure.
Yeah, no.
So many people watching this will know you. And if they didn't, they do now. And all of you students out there, former students, former soccer players, keep treating your teachers well like you treat Mr. Evans, because they're all good, but I mean, there are some that are better, that make an impact on your life. I'm still in touch with my high school history teacher and my high school geography teacher. They're in their mid-90s. So hello to Mr. Paul P.H. Jones and Mr. Ewart. And thank God for Facebook.
Yeah.
And
Thank you.
yeah, Mr. Ewart lost
Much
a dog.
love to all.
Yeah.
Much love to all.
Thank you for watching. Life is good. I was about to say thanks for flying JetBlue, but thanks for flying. Thanks for flying. Life is good. And we'll see you all next week. Thank you so much. Have a great rest of the week. Thank you, Tom.
They started going steady and bless my soul. He out-popped the buzzard and the Oreo. He rocks in the treetop all the day long, hopping and a-bopping and a-singing his song. All the little birds on Jaybird Street love to hear the robin go tweet, tweet, tweet. Rockin' Robin, tweet, tweet, rock, rockin' Robin. Slow rockin' Robin, 'cause we're really gonna rock tonight.